Welcome everybody, Jason Davies here with Body Remastered with another video to help you all to strengthen, build and tone your body and your muscles. Before we go into this video, which is all about eccentric contractions, I just want to remind everybody to take the opportunity to go to bodyremastered.com and please subscribe to Remastered Unlocked. We've got some great resources there in our 3 core values. Knowledge, balance and motivation, so check that out. Also, we have a really special product I want to share with you on our product page at bodyremastered.com, and that's our ebook on Remaster Your Eccentric, and it's a little bit about this video as well, so I'll give you a little bit of a teaser of some of the great material and information it will contain. So check that out. It's on bodyremastered.com, and there's a deal going for new subscribers. Get a cheaper rate on the ebook. So this is all about how we can remaster the eccentric. I'll give you a bit of a tease of why eccentric training and eccentric muscle contractions is such an important envelope and remit to consider when you're training. And I don't think eccentric contractions are spoken about enough. Trainers certainly use them as part of their program. But we don't actually design training programs based on eccentric mechanisms, and that's exactly what the ebook provides. It gives you a bespoke training plan on how you can really incorporate the eccentric moves, and there's something so powerful about eccentric contractions, which I'm going to provide you with in this video, and it really will give you an idea of why it's so important and why we are really missing out if we don't look at it in a more concentrated manner. So, I do have to say that there is a little bit of science in eccentric muscle contractions. I'm not going to go into the detail in this video, but you'll find it in the ebook, certainly in the introductory part. And it's not necessarily because we're all scientists, we want to understand what the science behind it is. Actually, certain parts of that science explains why eccentric training is so effective and why we should never miss out on it. But let's talk very basic first. There are 3 basic types of muscle contractions. Okay, there's isometric, there's concentric, and there's eccentric. And obviously this video is about eccentric training. So basically, when you talk about contractions, we are talking about the change in the length of the muscle fibre. And that's really as simple as that. And that explains the 3 different types. And if you think about contraction alone, on 3 different types, contraction is basically any time of tension on that muscle fibre. So let's just go through them. The first one I said was isometric. This one in essence means there's no change in the length of the muscle fibre. So it's, in essence, it's static. And we know that isometric exercises can play a part in building, strengthening and toning our muscles, and that's certainly an important part, and we can discuss that in another video. Second one is the concentric phase. Obviously a lot of us know about this part. Sometimes we think it's the hardest, but it's not necessarily. The concentric phase means that actually there's a shortening in the length of the muscle fibre. So we think about a classic curl, the muscle fibres are shortening in terms of their length. And if you haven't thought about it already, eccentric is the increase in the length or the stretching of the muscle fibre. So, in summary, an eccentric contraction is when the myofilaments of the muscle fibre basically stretches. It elongates, but it elongates under tension. Okay, and if you think about again that barbell curl, the eccentric phase, which is the part where you're lowering the weight, it's getting lengthened and you're still under tension. Okay. Now, when I said about myofilaments, basically they are made up out of the protein. We have thin filaments known as actin and thick filaments known as myosin. You don't need to know too much detail in that, but that's just the way in which a muscle is structurally composed. So I'm going to give you 6 fantastic reasons as to why you need to today make sure you incorporate eccentric training into your training regimes, and you will see a massive difference. And remember that eccentric training is not just about necessarily, and we talk about this at Body Remastered, the benefits you're going to get from building or strengthening your muscles, but it also has so many other benefits when it comes to metabolic rate and the health of your tendons, ligaments, etc. So we'll discuss that. So, without further ado, let's discuss the 6 main reasons. So, let's talk about the first one. In an eccentric contraction, or any contraction, there is such thing as what we call cross bridges between actin and myosin. Now, I'm not going to necessarily talk about the science of it because I don't fully understand it and we could be here forever. But what's important in eccentric contraction is that during this cross bridge cycle, i.e. the interaction between a myosin and an actin filament, there are less detachments. So what does that mean? In essence, it means that you can produce a greater force during the movement. This is great. You know, you can actually have a higher weight, potentially a weight that you're not used to or you don't feel like you're strong enough during the eccentric portion of the, I shouldn't say lift because you're not lifting, you're lowering, but of the cycle, the range of motion of the exercise. You can have a higher weight when you're lowering the exercise than you can on the concentric phase. That means more microscopic damage to the muscle and then faster muscle growth. So that's really essential if you want to break through strength plateaus or move to a higher resistance training or even endurance training at a more challenging weight. And you can incorporate that in between your sets by challenging yourself to higher weight during the eccentric portions of the exercises. Second one of my favourite. The eccentric part of the exercise requires less energy than the concentric phase. And it might feel like that when you're actually carrying out the lift, but it makes a big difference. So during a concentric contraction, so the concentric phase of the exercise, you actually use 1 molecule of ATP per actin and myosin detachment of the cross bridge. Now ATP is just an energy carrying molecule, so don't worry about the specifics of that. But during the eccentric portion of the exercise, you actually use less ATP, in essence because you're forcing some of the actin and myosin cross bridge detachments to occur because you are lengthening the muscle. So what does this mean? Actually, it means that you can not only increase the rate of muscle growth, but you can actually increase your metabolic rate. What does this mean? Well, not only can you increase the rate of muscle growth because you're lifting more, but you're actually increasing the rate of metabolism. So you're losing weight more efficiently when you're carrying out eccentric exercises than you are concentric exercises. So this brings me on to my third point. It's shown that if you have more eccentric type exercises in your training regime, then you're more likely to what they call delayed onset muscle soreness. I'll make sure I always say that correctly. Sometimes referred to as DOMS. You know, that sort of aching feeling that you feel a day or two after your workout, and that's no surprise because as I said in the previous 2 points, you're potentially using higher weights and it's more stressful for the body, and you're causing more muscle growth. Now, some people say, well, that's not necessarily a good thing, but it can be, because if you've got that DOMS process, you're going to basically increase your RMR, which is your resting metabolic rate. And again, back to the second point, increased metabolic resting rate means increased fat loss, ultimately. So again, it will support the 2 mechanisms of building muscle, solid muscle, but while also reducing muscle fat and having more lean muscle mass. But of course, let's look at the fourth point. Based on the third point that I said about increasing DOMS, some people would say, well, that's not great. That means I've got a rest for a longer time than I would usually, meaning less exercises maybe throughout the week, less frequency, and less training, doing the things you love. But there's another concept that we call the repeated bout effect. And that is, if you carry on doing and training the body to a certain way, you will adapt. So if you increase the frequency of eccentric exercises throughout your training regime, and we give a whole piece on this, you can find it in the ebook, you purchase our ebook, you will see that you will eventually become adapted. Your nervous system will become adapted, your connective tissues will become adaptive, and therefore, the repeated bout effect allows you to increase the frequency of eccentric training, getting all the benefits from it, and not to always have DOMS. So as I said, that's why sometimes people say don't chase for DOMs, because just because you don't have that sort of achy feeling the next day does not mean you've not had a really effective training session the day before. So let's look at number 5. The fifth point is actually there's a direct correlation between an eccentric exercise and the length of the muscle fibre. We spoke about that before. As you carry out an eccentric exercise, you elongate the muscle fibre. And what that means is that you actually increase the number of sarcomeres within the muscle fibre. And the sarcomeres are basically the subunits that are composed within the muscle filaments. What makes up the muscle in essence. So you're increasing the number of sarcomeres. That in essence will also support and improve your overall health and flexibility. This very process can help you become stronger and support your tendons, which is really important if you want longevity in your training, because by practicing the full range of motion of the eccentric training, you will get better flexibility. So the last point, number 6, potentially the most important, is that if you incorporate eccentric training into your plans, you will be able to train for longer in your life. It increases the longevity of training, and ultimately that's because you're strengthening the ligaments and the tendons. Because not only are you stretching and elongating the muscles, you're also stretching the tendons and the ligaments, and that's why you will see that many times for injuries, when a person has an injury or they're trying to be rehabilitated, they are looking at eccentric training because it really helps you to strengthen those core parts of your body, and that allows you to build a really strong foundation for the future. So they are the 6 main reasons you should definitely incorporate eccentric training into your training programs. Now, the next stage that we talk about, and it's in the ebook, is all about some of the great different techniques you can include in your training. Because you can include specific techniques as part of a set, or you can actually create a whole training program based on eccentric moves. And we talk about a lot of different things like super maximal eccentric training. We talk about eccentric micro sets, and we include a process called the 2-to-1, where you're potentially using one limb for the eccentric phase, because you're stronger, you can do a higher weight at that phase, and you're using 2 limbs for the concentric phase, because you can get past that a higher weight. So we cover all that detail. There's so many different techniques, and we list them all in our ebook, and we go through all the detail on how you can incorporate it. We do touch a little bit on this on our blog as well, so check that out at the bottom of the video, and go to bodyremastered.com and see everything that we've got on eccentric training. It's really important, and if you're not including it, you're missing out. So thanks very much for listening, everybody. I'll speak to you again soon.